Terhena. Sadakallahu alayhi lazim. So now we are going to listen to Janab Ghufraan Sahab. He is not a new speaker to us. We have been listening to him for a long time. And today he is going to talk on a different topic. The topic is new to the teachers also, and it will be more informative. Now let request Ghufraan Sahab to start his program.
So today we will start with this new topic, and the name of the topic is Educators KPIs or Teachers KPIs. KPIs means Key Performance Indicators. In every industry, we have key performance indicators in every industry, right? Whether it be the IT sector, whether it be the manufacturing sector, industrial sector, every sector we have KPIs. So should we have KPIs in the education sector as well, right? Key performance indicators involves
Video is there, sir? Video, if possible.
Yeah, actually, where I am now, right now, it's a rural area. If I start the video, I might have bandwidth issues.
Right.
So I am deliberately switched off the video because there is a bandwidth problem here, network problem here.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
So, with regards to KPIs, what do the people do when we have when we apply KPIs in the industry? First of all, what is to be measured gets decided. When KPIs are being formulated, what is to be measured? Then the data is collected. Data is collected with regards to what is to be measured. And then that data is analyzed and the results are reported. And then action is taken. So when it comes to KPIs in the education sector, this is the general trend or general format applied in the industrial sector. In the education sector, with regards to the teachers, yes, certainly we have to decide what to measure, what to test, what to see, what to observe. And then when you observe, you have to, when you're observing, when the in charge is observing the teacher in action, she then notes down the points, collects the data, notes down the points where the teacher is performing well and where the teacher is not performing up to the mark. And then she sits with the teacher later on after the class ends and counsels the teacher, trains the teacher in terms of what she has been doing well in the classroom and where she has been lacking, right? And then based on that, the teacher can take further action to improve, to enhance her performance. Now, where does this process of collection of data and observation takes place? In the classroom. It's the classroom observation that is of fundamental importance. Classroom observation. Unfortunately, in many schools, what we observe is that the in charge or the principals or those who are given the task of training the teachers and evaluating the performance, they get too stuck up in administrative affairs. They get too involved in administrative affairs and they don't really pay much attention. They don't really pay much attention to observing of teachers and training of teachers and enhancing their performance. This is something that has been observed time and again in several schools. So evaluation of teachers is of critical importance. Evaluating the teachers is of critical importance. As Lord Kelvin said, to measure is to know. If you cannot measure it, you cannot improve it. if you don't observe the teacher in action, and if you don't measure her performance based on certain established yardsticks, then you cannot suggest the teachers where to improve. Many a times the observer will go and sit in the classroom and observe the teacher. At the end of the session, she will say that you have done well, or you need to improve. But the teacher is clueless. In which area should I improve? What should I improve upon? And where have I done well? She is clueless. So making such blanket statements that you have done well, or there is scope for improvement and you can improve, you can do much better, it doesn't really contribute in the actual enhancement of the performance of the teachers. You need to have specific, clear indicators, right, which will indicate to the teachers specifically where she has to improve her performance, and where she is already doing well and where she can enhance her performance. And if you measure these parameters, only then you can understand the gap between the current state and the desired state, right? It is the duty of the one who is in charge, the principal, the headmaster, the supervisor, the coordinator, whoever is in charge of the academic improvement of the training of the teachers. He or she has to take into consideration what the current state of the teacher is, and she has to delineate and indicate and suggest to the teacher what the desired state is supposed to be, right? And then she has to give the teacher an action plan, right? The key steps to bridge the gap. How to bridge the gap between the current state and the desired state. This gap can be filled only if these performance indicators are evaluated, these parameters are evaluated in detail, right? And these KPIs are there not to embarrass the teacher, not to insult the teacher, not to pressurize the teacher. No, not at all. Rather, these KPIs are for the improvement of the teachers, are for the development of the teachers, right? Are for the growth of the teachers. Now, we've got to understand that there are kinds of evaluation yardsticks that we can have. One is qualitative, the other is quantitative. Qualitative and quantitative. In terms of quantitative, if we give a number to a teacher's performance, that, okay, this teacher has a 70% performance value, or 60% or 80%. The teacher doesn't quite understand what exactly she has done in terms of where she has performed well and in which areas she needs to improve. So that is the reason why I suggest qualitative performance parameters or key performance indicators, wherein specific items with regards to the teacher's performance in the classroom are dealt with. Specific performance parameters are dealt with. Certainly, I agree, and it is natural that there are certain parameters that are intangible. But even if these are intangible, right, we can always get an overall sense of what the performance value is, of what the performance level is. And then once the classroom performance is evaluated, the classroom performance evaluation has to be followed up, right? How does the teacher follow up? That has to be looked at. When there are certain teachers who perform very well in the classroom, but they are very poor in terms of checking the homework, for an instance, right? Following up on the instructions. There are certain teachers that might be very good in the classroom performance, but their general attitude is not that good. Their interaction with their fellow teachers is not very good. It's not very cordial. Now, these are also parts of the key performance indicators that we will discuss, because the teacher is not just performing, primarily she's performing in the classroom, but it's not just her performance in the classroom that has to be judged or observed. Her overall conduct has to be looked at. Her overall contribution in the development of the school has to be looked at. This is important, right? Then what we will get into, what are the specific items that we need to evaluate and observe with regards to key performance indicators of the teachers. The first and the primary thing that comes to our mind is subject proficiency, right? Proficiency in the subject matter that the teacher is teaching. That's the very first topic. That's the very first item on our agenda, right? Subject proficiency. The teacher should have expertise in the subject that he or she is teaching. If she doesn't have expertise in that subject matter, she will not have confidence, and her quality of performance will be hampered if she doesn't have the subject proficiency. So having expertise in the subject matter that you're teaching, having complete confidence in the subject matter that you're teaching is of critical importance. And only if you have complete confidence in your subject matter, you can try to make your class lively. You can enliven your class, right? This is the second point that we need to observe, whether the class is lively or whether the class is dull, whether the class is full of energy or whether the class is boring. This is something that we have to observe, whether the students are interested or whether the students are going to sleep, whether the students are enthused or whether the students are distracted. So this is something that we have to observe as an in charge, right? Whether the class is lively or not, right? And this is something that the teacher herself has to take into account, has to take cognizance of, has to be aware of, right? That she has to make her class lively. Then the next point that is a part of our key performance indicators is setting learning targets. Whether the teacher sets clear, crystal clear learning targets or not, right? Learning targets, learning goals are of critical importance. These learning goals should be clear, specific, and attainable. There should be clarity in terms of what she is supposed to achieve, and it should be very clear and specific, and they should be attainable. You shouldn't set goals which are beyond your scope. And in terms of setting learning goals, I always say that in a value-based school, there are two sets of goals that you have. One is the skill-based objectives and one is the trait-based objectives. Skill-based objectives are the plain skills that you have to inculcate, we have to teach. And then there are the traits, the character building aspects that you have got to incorporate in your lesson. That these also form a part of your goals, right? So setting learning targets and learning goals, whether the teacher sets the learning goals, sets it clearly, has specific learning targets or not, this is something that has to be evaluated. Then the next point is pre-assessments. Whether the teacher conducts pre-assessments or not, does the teacher gauge the prior knowledge of the students? Whether judges at what level the prior knowledge of the students is or not. This is something that has to be judged and evaluated and observed, because there are times when the teacher doesn't engage herself with the prior knowledge base of the students. She just comes and she has a goal of completing the portion and she just sets off without giving any consideration to what is the level at which the students already stand. Because if she doesn't take into cognizance, she doesn't consider what is the prior knowledge of the students, right? If she doesn't conduct these pre-assessments, right, by asking questions, right, then she will do a great disservice to the students. Why? Because the students will not be able to connect with what she's teaching. Because if she's teaching something which the students cannot understand, because of the fact that the students lack prior knowledge, then the students won't understand what is being taught. So she has to judge what the level of the prior knowledge of the students is, right? And she has to connect that prior knowledge with the new content that she's teaching. And if the prior knowledge is not up to the mark, she has to teach them the basics so as to enable them to understand the new content. She can't directly start the new content, right? Like if the teacher has to teach factorization, if the teacher has to teach how to remove, how to determine the factors, or if the teacher has to teach how to solve how to get your HCF, the highest common factors, and the LCMs, the least common multiples. But if the students don't even know what a prime number is, or doesn't understand, if the student doesn't understand the meaning of what factors are, right, then in such a situation, when she directly starts with solving the problem, the students won't be able to connect with the teacher. So it is important for the teacher to teach the students, right, what the prior knowledge is, as enable the students to connect the prior knowledge with new content that is being taught. Then the next point that the teacher should observe is probing questions. The probing questions, what are the kind of probing questions that the teacher is asking? The quality of the probing questions, the content and the quality, the profundity of the probing questions has to be evaluated. Whether the questions that the teachers are asked, that the teacher is asking, is deep enough, right? Whether the students can relate to the questions, whether the students can connect with the questions. This is something that the student, that the teacher has to take into consideration. The teacher has to take into consideration the how she's asking questions, how she's probing the students, right? What kind of questions she is asking during the process of explanation to induce curiosity among the students, to make them think, to make them ponder, right? And then to enhance the spirit of curiosity, and the students are thinking and coming up with answers, and this teacher is then picking those answers and then further questioning in the process of taking the process of teaching further. So what is the questioning of the teachers, right? How does she question, right? What is the level of her questioning is something that has to be judged as well. Then the next point that has to be considered is whether the teacher, this is connected with the pre-assessment that I talked about, this point, whether the teacher takes the content from the known to the unknown or not, or she directly brings up the unknown, because this is something that we already know. Many of us, we have many a times heard about it, that move from the known to the unknown, right? In the process of teaching, whether the teacher connects with the known, the already known content that the students know, and whether she picks up from there and takes it to the unknown and introduces the new concept or not, or whether she directly delivers the new content. So this is something that has to be judged, whether she moves from the known to the unknown, right? So I am already running short of time. It's already 7:01. So we'll continue with this process, inshallah ta'ala, next Saturday. Jazakumullahu khair. Wa akhiru dawana alhamdulillah.